One of the things I'm going to do here before I go much further, now that I got all the hoses on, I remembered what I said earlier is I wanted to pressure test this system but to make sure it's solid. This is my radiator pressure testing kit that I bought several years ago to working on a radiator on another one of my cars, and it's got adapters for all kinds of different connections and radiator caps. So what you need to do is pick out the adapter that looks a lot like your radiator cap as far as the width of the pads and so forth and the sealing. So you set the radiator cap aside, and then this has a big spring in it, so you have to push pretty good. I can get it to. There we go. So push it down against the spring, and then turn it. Make sure it goes all the way to the stop. And that seals the entire system off. And then you pull this one, which is the pump, and it's got a quick connect. So you snap that quick connect down there like so, and you'll see that it's got a pressure gauge on it. For these systems, about 15 psi, that's what they show as green. You can probably push it up to about 20. But you don't want to go a lot further than that. So what you do is you pump this thing full of air. I think the radiator cap said it was a 16-pound cap, but doesn't matter exactly. If you're somewhere, pick a point here. I'll pick 15. If I'm going to run at 16, I can run at 16. It really doesn't matter. But as we take a look at the gauge, right now the gauge is gauge is sitting right there at 16 pounds, and at the moment it's not moving. So actually it's a little short of 16. Let me get one more push. Alright, now we're on 16. And sometimes, I've used these before, sometimes you'll get a little bit of bleed down in the first few minutes, just as pressures equalize in the system and hoses expand just a little bit. But right now we got 16 pounds of air on the system. I'm going to set this aside and let it sit for a while, and we'll come back in an hour or so and see whether it's still holding pressure. If it's not, then I need to start hunting down where the source of the leak is. Coming back on the leak check pressure test, I did find a number of places where I had some drips. It's a good thing I did the pressure test. The heater hoses, for some reason I'm not real good at reefing on those clamps, so I went back and I had a leak there at the heater connections up here. I could see a little drippage going down to the ground, and I had one down here on this connection that was dripping. None of the other ones were dripping. So I'm at the point now where with a 15 psi on it, it's been sitting for an hour, I've still lost about 1 pound, which makes me suspect there could still be a leak, but I have no external leaks. I've been in and checked the heater core box. There's nothing leaking in the car. There are no hoses dripping, and almost everything's underwater. There are a couple of fittings up here that could still have air in them, and I've cinched those down a second time too. So everything's pretty doggone tight, and I've cut the leak rate way down. I've had some trouble with the adapter. I mean, the other place you can have a leak is the seals here, you know, whether you have a really good O-ring seat in the filler neck. And this is a quick connect, which again has the ability to bleed a little, so sometimes this kit isn't perfectly sealed. But I'm going to check one more thing here. We're going to let the air out, because I really think I'm fine. I could end up being surprised, but let's take her all the way to the bottom here. Take the adapter off, because it's really hard to tell. I mean, the adapter goes in really well. See, it doesn't want to come back out. I'm going to check just a little bit harder. It does look, if you look down in the filler neck, it's hard to see, but there has been some drop in the level, which one could just be me filling up air pockets. But with less in there, it seems like there could still be a leak, so I'm going to check a little bit harder and make sure that it's not leaking somewhere. Head gaskets and intake manifold gaskets could conceivably leak. Would seem really unlikely. The engine guys are, you know, they did the head gaskets and they torqued everything up and it was ready to go. I was very careful with the intake gaskets and used sealer on them and around the coolant ports, and so that doesn't make sense. And then I did pull the dipstick. I have oil in it, and the oil level hasn't changed, so it's not like I just put another quart in the pan. So I need to check around the engine and see what's going on here, and whether it's anything unusual. I ran a pressure drop test overnight since it was losing pressure yesterday. I kept filling the system, bleeding air out of it. Every time I went back at it, it seemed like it was down a little bit. A little bit it looked like a lot on the radiator, but it was, I think through the whole day I put another quart in, and the book says it's a 17 quart system, so it basically says I should have a full system. And toward the evening, I was the pressure loss slowed down a lot. So checking it this morning, it's sat now, you know, like 8 hours, and I'm sitting here at about 12 and a half, almost 13 psi. So when I started, before I started fixing leaks, I was losing about a psi an hour. So now I lost like 2 psi overnight, and I'm going to double check what what's in the radiator. So let's bleed the pressure off here. The other good thing, or interesting thing I guess, is that the pressure relief is bringing back liquid. Right now it's air, but all right. Thought I had the pressure off all the way. Guess not. We'll make a mess here. All right. have to set the camera down here for a minute. So I made a little bit of a mess here when it sprayed out. I didn't lose very much coolant, probably only a couple of ounces. It was just a little bit surprising. Kind of splattered all over here. But the good news is the radiator is still full, or darn near full. It blew back a little bit, and it probably still has some air pockets in it, which is why it sprayed back. So I'm going to declare this test successful. I've always felt that my tester, that the quick connect on the tester didn't seal completely tightly. Seemed like once I got coolant in it last night, it sealed better once it got wet. And in any case, so in the meantime, while I was running that test, I've been installing accessories. Engine's getting closer. I've got all the belts on and tensioned, the water pump pulley, the air conditioning compressor, the alternator, air pump belts. So I got all 4 belts on there. Still need to drop the fan in. I've made some electrical connections, like for the alternator and so forth, and some of the injectors. So getting close to being able to finish the connections and put the battery in. One last check on the coolant front. If I dip the oil here, and it hasn't been running, so I don't need to re-wipe it. No, it's the wrong side of the... If I flip it over to the back side of the dipstick, trying to make it not shake. On the front side of the dipstick, it's a little oily, and it shows full. And on the back side, it shows about a half a quart low, half to 3/4, yeah, about a half a quart low. And that's consistent with how it's been before I put the coolant in it. So I don't see any evidence of coolant going into the oil. If I'd have lost a quart overnight, it should show up on the stick, and it's showing where it was last night. So back to making connections, and need to put the fan in and make some connections here. Finally have it all back together. Everything's wired, everything's installed. Had a real fuss with some wiring harnesses back at the firewall, trying to get them lined up because I ran out of clearance and length of harness to get to the air conditioning compressor, and had to readjust harnesses again. But now everything appears to be in place, and I'll start checking it out.